Well, it's not time to plan your vacation to Baghdad just yet. And we're going to take a look at the Muslim pilgrimage to Mecca and talk some more about what's happening in Afghanistan as well. All that's coming up on today's Hot Zone.
This is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hey folks, Chuck Holton here. You might wonder why I'm out on the front porch recording the podcast instead of up in my studio. Well, you hear that thunder? Yeah, we're going to talk more about that in a second. But before that, yesterday I broke the news that you can now donate to the Hot Zone via Victor Marx's website, All Things Possible Ministries. We're partnering up with Victor, so any donations you give will be tax deductible if you want them to be. If you're currently donating via patreon.com/hotzone and want to write off your donations, then unsubscribe over there and start giving at victormarx.com/hotzone. And speaking of donations, something bad but kind of funny happened yesterday while I was filming the podcast. Lightning struck my house. It's rainy season here in Panama, and I was just finishing up the podcast, and boom, blew out the TV I use for a backdrop. It's absolutely amazing with so many people. Holy crap. Actually, it wasn't all that funny at all. That was an expensive TV, and even though I had it plugged in to a very good surge protector, the bolt was so powerful it killed the TV anyway. So I'm stuck either using a green screen or recording outside for now until I can get that thing fixed. Well, another huge bomb went off Monday afternoon in Baghdad at a weapons depot at a military base just south of the city. It happened, we don't have all the details because it just happened, but it appears the base belonged to a Shia militia, which you might remember is backed by Iran. So it probably wasn't an accident. Some people are saying it may have happened because of an airstrike done by Israel, since they've been sort of hitting Iranian assets in Iraq more and more lately. And if that's the case, it'd be a big strike and might have some big repercussions. Remember, everybody has designs on this region for one reason or another. And the government in Baghdad has been pretty big, well influenced by Iran. And that's a bad thing for the U.S., the Kurds, and especially Israel. Israel can't allow Iran to establish a land bridge to Hezbollah in Lebanon. So something big just blew up in Baghdad at the moment. We don't have any word on deaths or injuries, but we'll keep you posted. All right, now let's talk about something that's supposed to unify Muslims around the world, whether they're Shia or Sunni. It's called the Hajj. It's the annual Muslim pilgrimage that started on Friday. It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam Muslims are commanded to adhere to. And the rule is this: if they're physically and financially able to make the journey to Mecca in Saudi Arabia, they're required to do that at least once in their lives. It's a 5-day-long thing where Muslims basically get together in mind-bogglingly large crowds around the holiest sites in Islam to seek redemption, forgive their enemies, etc. They dress up in white robes and form a procession around the Kaaba, which is a cube-shaped structure draped in black silk. It's kind of like the Holy of Holies for Muslims. They say it was made by the prophet Abraham, and the prophet Muhammad was the first one to make a pilgrimage there in 628 AD with 1,400 of his followers. He didn't need a visa back then, but now, because millions of Muslims want to attend, the government's pretty strict about who can get a visa. In case you were wondering, I can't get a visa because I'm not a Muslim. Now, estimates are this year that they're going to have about 1.8 million people making that pilgrimage, and so that's going to be pretty busy. All right, let's move over to Afghanistan. I've got so much content from there that I shot last week. You're going to get a real education about the issues facing that country and our troops over there for the next few days. So there's a lot to cover. As you probably know, I spent a couple of days on the front side of my visit wandering around Kabul, which I would not recommend at this point. There's an in-depth report that I was making for CBN and with some content you haven't seen yet, and I added to it. Here it is. So the 18-year war in Afghanistan might be coming to a close as U.S. and Afghan diplomats negotiate for peace with the Taliban. But with rising violence and presidential elections there less than a month away, nobody's really certain what Afghanistan is going to look like by the end of the year. Now, I traveled there last week, as you know, to find out. This Afghan street market in the capital city of Kabul is bustling after Friday prayers. But there's a tension in the air anytime large groups of people are found in one place. The threat of suicide bombers is at an all-time high and are now an almost daily occurrence. In the time I was in Afghanistan, there were car bombs and suicide attacks happening with stunning regularity. That made walking around a really, really dangerous thing to do. But I took a chance one afternoon and visited that market where I found that the people were really super polite and friendly. I walked down Chicken Street, which is famous for ancient rug shops that have been there, literally since antiquity. I ate some really great shish kebabs made of lamb with peppers that were delicious. One day in late July, the city suffered 3 car bombs in one day. This merchant was nearby when the bombs went off. He says he was doing his duty inside the compound when he heard explosions and came running. He saw some wounded victims lying on the ground near his office. The target was apparently 2 armored vehicles, but he doesn't know who was inside them. Donald Trump says he's tired of hearing that the United States is losing the war in Afghanistan, and he says the American people feel the same way. And that's why the U.S. military has been having talks with our enemies, the Taliban, here in Afghanistan to try to come up with a ceasefire. But even while they're doing that, the Taliban has been stepping up attacks around Kabul, like the one that happened right here in front of Kabul University in mid-July. They killed more than 10 people. But if we've learned anything from the precipitous pullout that happened in 2011 in Iraq, it's that if we pull out too soon or in the wrong way, it could have serious consequences for the United States in the future. So over 17,000 coalition troops are still in the country, but their role has really changed dramatically from the direct action one to one that's more focused on an advise and assist mission. This is the same thing we're doing in Iraq. This means Afghan troops are doing the lion's share of the fighting and of the dying. While the U.S. has lost about 12 soldiers this year, and that's certainly 12 too many, the Afghans regularly lose over 100 soldiers in a normal week. In 1 week in June, Afghan troops lost 249 killed and a whole lot more injured. So despite decades of training alongside U.S. troops, Afghan soldiers remain one of the least effective fighting forces on the planet and are plagued by low rates of literacy and morale. There's even a huge problem with so-called ghost soldiers who don't actually exist, and instead the generals have for years claimed these troops and then pocketed their pay. I spent a lot of time with Afghan troops, and without a doubt, one of the biggest problems with bringing them up to the level of a professional fighting force is the lack of education. The U.S. has implemented vast literacy programs trying to improve that, but we're limited by an agreement with the Afghan government being able to only teach them from the Quran and other writings from the Prophet Muhammad. I believe this might have something to do with the ongoing green on blue attacks that we've seen among Afghan troops for years, where every once in a while they just turn on our forces and start killing them without any warning. Another contributing factor to the uptick in violence we're seeing across Afghanistan right now are the upcoming presidential elections at the end of September. Back in July, there was a massive complex attack at this building behind me, which were the offices of the president's running mate, Ashraf Ghani, the president of Afghanistan, the incumbent. And it just shows that the Taliban is flexing its muscles in advance of that upcoming election. So Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said in a speech in August that the solutions to Afghanistan's problems are diplomatic, not military. And the U.S. is committed to working with the Afghan government to finally extricate our forces from the country.
President Trump has made very clear that his desire is that we develop a diplomatic resolution that permits us to reduce the resources that are located there in country while simultaneously ensuring that Afghanistan never again becomes a platform where a terror can strike the United States of America.
So during that event, the secretary was asked about the building tensions with Iran centered around the Straits of Hormuz. Here's what he had to say to those questions, as well as some quotes from the Australian Prime Minister and others that were at the conference.
It was very clear to me there that a negotiated settlement is the only way forward for peace in Afghanistan. Our position is under constant review, as you would expect, and we are now waiting to see what happens with the 28th September election and also with the next round of peace talks. We are, of course, looking forward, but we have not yet made any decisions, and we will, of course, take any future considerations in Afghanistan in terms of other regional priorities and issues. But again, whatever we do there is got to be at the behest of the Afghan government.
The United States has been very clear that the purpose of our proposed operations in the Strait of Hormuz, the Persian Gulf, the Gulf of Oman has been twofold. First of all, to promote the principle of freedom of navigation and freedom of commerce through all waterways, particularly that one, number one. Number two, is to prevent any provocative actions by Iran that might lead to some misunderstanding or miscalculation that could lead to a conflict.
And so I am confident that when we begin to build out this process and begin to develop the operational concept, which will be run by Secretary of Defense and his team, I'm very confident that we will have a global coalition that does what Secretary Esper spoke to, which reduces the risk of conflict in the region and enables the freedom of navigation, just as we spoke about the freedom of navigation in the straits in this region that the United States participates in. It's very important that every country that has an interest in that region and has goods and services that flow, energy that flows into places like Japan and Korea, that they participate in a way that protects the interests of their own economy.
Now, the U.S. has deployed one of its largest aircraft carriers, the USS Abraham Lincoln, to the Middle East after months of heightened tensions with Iran. The multi-billion-dollar aircraft carrier, which is enormous, was sent by President Trump to the North Arabian Sea, where last month Iran boarded a British ship in retaliation to the UK blockading one of Iran's oil tankers, which was flagged here in Panama. The USS Abraham Lincoln is one of the U.S.'s largest aircraft carriers, and it arrived in the region in May, earlier than it was supposed to, after tensions escalated with Iran. But the ship has yet to enter the Straits of Hormuz. U.S. jets in the area are fitted with cameras to sort of keep an eye on the waters below, making it harder for tankers in the Gulf to be targeted and then recording any interactions that take place. Commander Michael Boyle says he believes that preparation is the backbone to deterrence.
A large part of deterrence is the readiness that backs that deterrence up. So we're ready to defend the U.S. and the U.S. interests if called upon.
And that may be one good argument for leaving at least a few troops in Afghanistan over the long term. They will serve as a deterrent both to Iran and to China, because those countries would love nothing more than to get their hands on all of the natural resources that Afghanistan is sitting on. That's already happening to some extent. China's been buying up mineral rights all over Afghanistan for years. Despite the recent increases in violence, things have gotten better in Afghanistan since I started coming here, at least back in 2007, 2008. You can look at factors like the infant mortality rate, which has gone way down. Gross domestic product is 5 times what it used to be. And life expectancy, which was only 43 years, is now in the mid-60s. So things are getting better, but the concern is that if the U.S. leaves precipitously, it could cause a lot of those gains to be reversed. So for the shoppers in this downtown market, the best future they can really hope for right now is basically make it home to their families one more day without getting blown up. So that's my report from Afghanistan. And just for some context, I also wanted to show you a package that we made a few years ago in Afghanistan. See if you think much has changed.
A counterinsurgency campaign like the one being waged here in Afghanistan isn't won by gun battles alone. Sometimes it takes listening to the people. In this case, at a shura held in Washir district among these tribal elders and the executive officer of 2nd Regimental Combat Team. Lieutenant Colonel Stephen Grass is the executive officer of Regimental Combat Team 2 here with the U.S. Marines. Colonel, you just led this shura. How important are these to what you're doing in counterinsurgency?
Sir, our whole fight's about the people here, providing them security and making sure that they understand that we're in tune with their needs.
Major Jordan Walzer is commanding officer of Task Force Raider, 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion. Did we gain any ground here today?
Absolutely, sir. This is the first time we've been up in this area to see these people. We've made a connection. We sat down and we were kind of in the receive mode to listen. But that's what it's all about. Counterinsurgency, it's a people business.
This was once an elementary school. The Taliban came and destroyed it. They burned it, gutted the classrooms, because they didn't want the children to be educated. The people here in Washir district want our help to make sure that never happens again.
Education seems to be a very important thing to them, and they specifically said that they want their children to be educated so they can shepherd the future of Afghanistan themselves.
In Washir district of Helmand province, Afghanistan, I'm Oliver North for Fox News.
Look, Afghanistan is going to remain interesting without a doubt. In addition, there's a lot still going on in Hong Kong that you've probably been being seen on the news, and I wanted to mention it, though. Word is Chinese troops are moving into Hong Kong. So within a day or two, there might be some really serious violence happening there to the protesters. You might have seen on the news that Hong Kongers took over the international airport there and shut down incoming flights for a little while on Monday. I also hear they're waving American flags and singing the U.S. national anthem, which to them symbolizes freedom and liberty from oppression, which is kind of ironic that I didn't see anybody taking a knee there while they were singing the Star-Spangled Banner. They get it, even if our pampered pigskin princes really don't. That's all I have for today, folks. Thanks for watching and sharing the podcast with your friends. You can donate via PayPal at HotZoneHolton@gmail.com, patreon.com/HotZone, or like I said at the start of the show, at victormarks.com/HotZone. So from a very rainy and stormy Panama, thanks for watching. I'm Chuck Holton.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.